The camera is already rolling when his tone changes. Up until this point, it sounds like another recap, another messy internet situation. And then, without warning, the air in the room shifts. His shoulders lean forward, eyes narrow, and he stops, talking to the audience, and starts talking straight to her. Tamar, not as a stranger, not as a headline.
You aware of what really happened to you?
No, I'm not.
Or can you talk about
I can talk about it, but I'm not aware of what really happened to me.
As someone he once called a friend, there's a small pause, just long enough for the silence to feel uncomfortable. And then he goes there. "I'm telling you to your damn face," he says, steady and deliberate. "You was a bold-faced, bald-headed goddamn liar." The clip freezes on that frame across social media. His expression locked in, jaw set, eyes tight with a mix of hurt and exhaustion. Fans loop that one line over and over, stitching it into reaction videos, slowing it down, rewinding it. Pairing it with the audio from Tamar's own interview, where she insists she doesn't know what really happened to her that night. Only that she went to a friend's birthday party and gave a friend a birthday party. It's two stories. One night and a growing sense that both of them cannot be true in the same way. On one side, you have Tamar calmly telling L'Oreal she isn't aware of what really happened, brushing past the details like they're too foggy to hold. On the other, you have Funky retracing every step, every restaurant, every car ride. Building a timeline, he says, proves the narrative she's telling is not just incomplete, but crafted as the clip spreads. So do the interpretations. Some viewers claim this is the moment the mask slips, that his frustration feels too specific, too detailed to be dismissed as random internet mess. Others insist he's hurt, not honest, that his emotions are muddying the truth. And somewhere in the middle, a louder question starts to rise. When Tamar describes that night as a birthday party she hosted, is she denying his version? Or accidentally confirming the parts she left out, has buried under the dragging? The jokes and the memes, one uncomfortable thought keeps resurfacing in the comments. If she really can't remember what happened, why does his story sound this precise? The moment his words hit the air, something shifts in the way people start to watch the footage. What began as a messy public disagreement suddenly feels like the opening file in a deeper case. A situation where emotions and facts no longer move together, but collide in unpredictable.
In comes walking Mendeecees and his homeboy, okay? Now, this is the third time that me and you have been hanging out, and out of nowhere, here comes Mendeecees, okay? Now, you can make
predictable patterns. The camera catches every flicker across his face. This isn't performance anger. Something heavier, something built over time, something he's been carrying long before he pressed record. He breathes out once, steadying himself, and the clip rolls into the part that makes the internet freeze. It's when he repeats Tamar's own line back to her. It's almost like he's analyzing evidence. Tamar saying she is not aware of what really happened to her. The way she says it in her interview is calm, almost too calm for someone describing a night that allegedly left her shaken. She doesn't flinch. Her voice doesn't crack, she just says it. And for many watching, that composure is either admirable or suspicious. He sees it as the latter. His expression tightens the moment those lines play. To him, this isn't forgetfulness. This is manipulation, a narrative being shaped. And that's where he begins the slow, methodical breakdown of the night both of them referenced. Not a wild conspiracy, not a scandalous accusation, just his version of a timeline that he claims she keeps rewriting. And the tension of that conflict is what pulls people into the story. He recounts how she wasn't throwing a birthday party for him at all. He says she and her friends were simply hungry, calling him to ask what was open in his area. He explains that he suggested a restaurant. They agreed. And that, to him, was the true origin of the night. Not some grand gesture she claimed on camera. There's a quiet intensity to the way he narrates it. Not rushed, not emotional, almost like a detective walking through a crime scene. he's already familiar with. Every detail feels deliberate. The closed restaurants, the phone call, the arrival of Zoe, the familiar faces, the expected energy. Nothing unusual yet, but then a shift enters the timeline. He mentions how Mendeecees and his friend arrived at the restaurant unexpectedly, without being part of the original plan. And while he chooses his words carefully, the implication is unmistakable. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a casual drop-in. This was something arranged. The internet grabs that point instantly. Commenters slow down the footage, examining the phrasing, the pauses.
You went to the internet. You said you woke up in a pool of blood and almost died. In this interview with L'Oreal, you mentioned that you were home with David or somebody, and they said we need to call the ambulance, and you...
The way he says out of nowhere. To some, it sounds like jealousy. To others, it sounds like someone who noticed a pattern long before it became public. And to a growing portion of viewers,
This whole thing was, Tamar, is that I was never comfortable with the relationship that you and Mendeecees had in front of me, okay? All of that, you at the music...
Sounds like the first real fracture in the narrative Tamar offered, because once she told the world she threw a party for him. And he responded by laying out every reason why that was untrue. The gap between their stories became its own kind of evidence. When he describes his reluctance to continue the night, how he didn't want to go to the next location, how he dragged himself there only because the group insisted, the tone deepens. It doesn't sound like a man excited to celebrate. It sounds like someone who sensed something was off.
Goddamn car and went home because you was sitting on his lap in that goddamn Uber and y'all ass was kissing, okay? And the shit made me damn uncomfortable, okay? Now, if anybody know who happened...
But didn't have the language for it. Yet, and then there's the moment. Viewers pause the clip more than any other clip. Tamar mentioning she gave a friend a birthday party. His reaction to this segment becomes almost forensic. He breaks down exactly why this line bothers him. To him, it isn't an innocent exaggeration. It's a narrative planted to shift blame, to create sympathy, to misdirect the public into thinking he wronged her on a night she orchestrated for him. And whether or not viewers agree with him, one thing becomes clear. Tamar's wording opens the door to interpretations she may not have intended, because when she says, "I gave a friend a birthday party," she positions herself as the generous one, the victim who was repaid with betrayal, the supportive friend hurt by the person she celebrated. And on its own, it's a compelling story. But once his version enters the room, suddenly the story isn't a story anymore. It's an argument. Two conflicting timelines. Two incompatible truths. And an audience forced to choose between them. This is where the thriller tone settles into the narrative. Not through danger, not through violence, but through uncertainty. The kind that makes you question motives, decisions, memories. The kind that makes silence feel louder than words. Then he adds a layer that deepens everything. Emotional hurt. He admits he wishes things could go back to the way they were. He admits he didn't want any of this to happen. He admits that he is, in his own way, grieving the end of a friendship he once valued. And the more people compare the interviews, the more the gaps widen. And it is inside those gaps between what she says and what he describes that rumors start to take shape. He explains how the entire group moved from one location to another, describing his reluctance at every stop. The details aren't dramatic on their own. Restaurants closing, friends deciding where to go next, someone suggesting another spot. But the repetition of his reluctance becomes its own signal. He didn't want to continue the night. He didn't want to switch locations. He didn't want to leave his car. Every step felt like a decision pushed onto him by the group, or more specifically, by her. And this matters because it frames the rest of the night not as a celebration, but as something he felt dragged into, something that didn't feel organic to him from the start. That subtle shift in tone creates a new tension, Was Tamar trying to stage a narrative before dawn even hit? Then he mentions the part that sends viewers spiraling, the car ride. Not the destination, the dynamic inside that vehicle. According to him, by the time they reached Tamar's house, she wasn't sitting alone in the back seat. She wasn't distant. She wasn't half asleep from a long night. She was, as he describes it, sitting on Mendeecees' lap. And they were kissing. That detail detonates a...
And the whole issue, Tamar, about the whole thing was the fact that you don't get to go around and create media shitstorms that involve other people
across the internet. Because earlier in the timeline, Skye suggested she barely knew him, describing their relationship as casual, minimal, harmless. Yet here is a completely different picture, not from a stranger or a blog, but from someone who says he was in the same vehicle. Watching the interaction unfold inches away from him, this is where fans begin dissecting intentions. Why would she downplay the relationship on camera? Why would she frame the night as a party for a friend if the energy in the car told a different story? And why would she claim not to know what happened if the events leading up to it were allegedly this intimate? None of these questions are answered in the transcript. But their existence speaks louder than any confirmation would. Still, he does not accuse her of wrongdoing. He does not claim definitively what happened upstairs. Instead, he focuses on why he made the choice he made. He didn't go upstairs with her because, in his words, he believed they wanted privacy. He believed the night was no longer about him, but about whatever was unfolding between them. That distinction becomes a turning point in the narrative. Because once he says that, once he reveals he was left out of the storyline, she publicly built around him, viewers start questioning.
Finna sit your triple face ass up there on L'Oreal's podcast and pretend like, oh, you just had a friend that just did you so wrong. You were just done so wrong. Because if anything, I was the one that was the
questioning whether her interview was ever meant to clarify anything, or whether it was constructed to shield something else entirely. This leads into the part of the transcript that feels more like evidence than commentary. His line about deciding to go home after seeing them together in the car. He doesn't shout, he doesn't exaggerate. He simply states his decision. He went home. She went upstairs. He wasn't there. He doesn't know what happened next. That admission is what makes the internet lean forward, because it contradicts the public assumptions that had been made about his involvement. When she went online claiming she woke up injured, people blamed him, people dragged him, people accused him, and yet, according to his own account, he wasn't even present when any of that happened, the moment he describes being blamed.
thing because they knew we were together the night before and they were just waiting for me to tell what happened. And I said, I don't know what happened to the lady. But I said, baby, I went home. That lady went upstairs. I went home. I don't know what happened to that lady.
DESPITE not being there introduces a new emotional layer. He isn't just defending himself. He's mourning the way the narrative chose him as a villain before he could even respond. And this, unintentionally, is where viewers begin to notice the cracks in Tamar's version. Because storytelling isn't just about facts, it's about consistency. And it becomes harder for audiences to reconcile someone claiming not to know what happened with someone else, laying out a precise timeline that contradicts her explanation of the night. Then comes the detail about the phone calls at V12. Multiple people asking him why she was sitting on Mendeecees' lap. Multiple people observing the same dynamic he witnessed. Multiple people allegedly confused by what they were seeing. He lets that hang in the air. He doesn't push it. He simply mentions it, and the sentence has more force because of its restraint. The more he speaks, the more the pattern emerges. He isn't trying to expose secrets. He's trying to defend himself from a narrative he believes was designed to harm him. And this is where viewers begin to consider an uncomfortable possibility: that both of them may be telling the truth as they understand it, but only one of them is acknowledging the full timeline, because when he finally says he regrets going this route, when he acknowledges that it feeds into the stereotype of him being messy, something vulnerable surfaces. He is aware of how this looks. He knows people will use this moment to paint him as problematic, but he still believes the truth. His truth. It's bigger than that risk. And that vulnerability creates another split online. Some say he's manipulating emotions. Others believe Tamar manipulated hers first. And a large group believes the truth is buried somewhere between their stories. Tangled in moments neither of them chooses to describe directly, but the most explosive moment is still ahead. The one where he steps away from the events of the night and places responsibility on the public narrative she created. And that pivot changes the tone of everything that comes after. Because once he claims he was the collateral damage in her story, the entire conflict shifts from a private disagreement to a public reckoning. Yet the deeper question remains untouched, unspoken, unresolved. If she truly believed he wronged her, why didn't her details align with the timeline he laid out? And if she didn't believe that at all, then why did her story frame him that way? Those are the questions that will shadow the next developments, the ones that take the tension. From personal conflict into full-scale public fallout, the shift happens quietly, almost too quietly for people to catch it at first. He moves from describing events to describing impact, and that's where the entire story deepens. Because until this point, viewers were piecing together timelines and body language, trying to understand what happened, but now the transcript begins to explore what the aftermath felt like, especially once the internet started reacting to Tamar's original claims. And the heart of it sits in one line that echoes louder the more people revisit the footage. She went online saying she woke up in a pool of blood and almost died. That phrase alone, almost died, becomes the emotional anchor of her narrative. Viewers remember how the internet erupted the first time she said it. Countless accounts reshared her statement with dramatic edits, threads, theories, and sympathy poured into her comments section. But at the same time, a dark undercurrent began forming because her story didn't include who else had been present earlier that night. He didn't deny they were together before the incident, but he made one thing extremely clear. He was not with her when she went upstairs. And he repeats it calmly, almost clinically, even so. Her early public statements were vague enough that people filled in the blanks with him at the center. He felt it immediately. It's the way he describes the outrage, the accusations, the assumptions. It sounds like someone who suddenly realized the internet had chosen a villain before even hearing his side. Here is where one of the interview clips resurfaces with new weight. Part where he mentions that Tamar said she almost died. The way he mentions it feels less like disbelief and more like someone who has seen the truth bent and stretched online, until it no longer resembles what actually happened. He doesn't accuse her of lying. He questions her framing. Why would someone say something so dramatic without clarifying who wasn't present? Why let the world assume this narrative had something to do with him? And when he reveals that someone actually suggested calling an ambulance that night, and that she allegedly refused, the internet erupts again. This time with skepticism. This time with questions instead of comfort. He emphasizes the contradiction, not with hostility, but with exhaustion. There's a weight in his voice when he repeats that detail, almost as if he's reliving the moment. He heard it. Her refusing the ambulance contradicts the intensity of her earlier claim. It creates a gap too wide for casual viewers to ignore, and gaps invite theories. This is where fans start putting together their own timeline logs. Message boards fill with threads trying to align the emotional drama of her story with the logistical clarity of his. And no matter which side viewers land on, the tension between the two narratives becomes impossible to ignore. Then comes the portion of the transcript that shifts the tone entirely when he begins to describe how she allegedly shaped her narrative, while leaving him to face the consequences alone. He points out how she went online and created A media wave so large it swallowed every context. Thousands waited for him to speak. Thousands speculated. And when he finally went live to defend himself, he couldn't even offer clarity because he didn't know what happened. He wasn't there. He said it plainly, and that only made the pressure heavier. But the most striking moment comes when he mentions that even after he asked her directly to tell people he did nothing, she refused. And when she eventually did post something, she took it down the next day. That part hits people. The transcript doesn't explain why she removed it, but the act alone reshapes the entire narrative. If she was certain he wasn't involved, why remove the clarification? If she wasn't certain, why speak at all? And if she was trying to protect someone else, why allow the internet to believe he might be the cause? Questions keep multiplying. He doesn't attack her. He mourns what the silence cost him. Okay? He talks about being dragged online, about being blamed for things he knows nothing about. But the most charged moment, the one that ripples through every reaction video and commentary thread, is when he reveals that, in his view, the only person truly wronged in all of this wasn't him or her. It was Yan Dy. This is where tension spikes again. Not because he gives explicit details, but because he hints at a dynamic that extends beyond the night itself. He suggests there were implications, hidden connections, and emotional betrayals not fully addressed. This is where viewers begin connecting. The transcript's earlier references to interactions between Tamar and Mendeecees with this later emotional fallout, yet he doesn't elaborate. He drops the line like a stone into water and lets the ripples form on their own. The internet does the rest. Reaction channels freeze frame every expression, analyzing each pause. Are his words a figure of speech or something deeper? Is he implying emotional betrayal or something more literal? The transcript doesn't answer, but his fatigue says enough. It's a man who feels wronged twice, once by her story, and again by the public's willingness to believe it. Threads appear on social platforms comparing his descriptions of the night with her recounting. The discrepancies widen, the unanswered questions grow. And suddenly, the narrative isn't about a single night. It becomes about accountability, perception, and the danger of ambiguity when an entire online audience fills gaps with imagination. One of the last interview moments in this section adds more pressure to the inconsistencies. Clear, he says she created a media storm without his permission. The calmness of the delivery only amplifies the severity of the accusation. Not factual wrongdoing, narrative wrongdoing, emotional wrongdoing. Reputation damage. As he says it, it becomes clear this isn't revenge or exposure to someone who felt trapped inside a story he didn't write. Portrayed in a way he couldn't correct and blamed for something he wasn't present to witness. And this leads into the emerging fear viewers have by this point. If neither of them is giving the full story, how much of the truth is still hidden between the lines? How much is buried in the silence? How much remains unspoken behind closed doors? That question becomes the guiding force moving into the next escalation. The moment he embraces the role she allegedly carved for him. It's the messy one, the loud one, the one who tells the truth when pushed too far. But even that role comes with a cost neither of them fully anticipated. The turning point arrives quietly, almost disguised in the rhythm of his voice. After recounting the pressure, the blame, and the silence, he shifts into something sharper, a kind of resigned clarity. The transcript doesn't escalate in volume, but the intensity deepens. He begins acknowledging the role he's now forced to play, the role he says she pushed him into by refusing to correct the storyline she built. It's in this shift that viewers feel the tone darken further. As if the lights dim and the camera pulls in closer, he's no longer unraveling the night. He's unraveling the consequences of the night. He brings up the people who contacted him. The ones who insisted she must have been doing something inappropriate simply because they saw her behavior in public. But instead of using those observations to condemn her, he frames them as proof of the misunderstanding he was thrown into. It wasn't his story. It wasn't his narrative. But he was cast in it against his will. The internet seizes on this idea, not because it confirms anything, but because it reveals how much power a single ambiguous statement can carry once amplified across thousands of screens. And then comes another interview moment that fans repeatedly cite as the emotional fulcrum of the conflict. Clip where he says she painted him as if he wronged her, when he believes he was the collateral damage. The sentence hits like a low-frequency vibration, subtle but undeniably heavy. People replay it over and over, reading into the pause after the word collateral. Some say he sounds wounded. Others say he sounds relieved to finally release what he's held inside. And some believe the moment exposes not just their personal conflict, but a long-standing pattern of miscommunication between public figures and the narratives they craft online. From here, the tension shifts into something broader than the two of them. The idea of damage, reputational, emotional, relational, becomes its own character in the unfolding drama. He explains that he had warned her several times to leave him alone publicly, emphasizing that he wasn't like the others around her. Not the type to stay silent, not the type to hold back when pushed. It's a pivot from recounting the past to declaring boundaries in the present. This is where the transcript dips into his self-perception. He calls himself messy, but in a resigned way, almost as if he's reclaiming an identity she forced onto him. Viewers begin debating whether this is self-defense or self-awareness. Regardless, the effect is unmistakable. It reframes the entire narrative as a battle between perceived intentions and perceived betrayals. Then comes the part of the transcript that fractures audience reactions again. He explains how she refused to correct the false assumptions the internet made about him even after he asked. He explains how she took down her clarification when she finally posted it. And when he recounts the impact that silence had on him, his tone carries something rawer than anger, something like disappointment. In that silence, he suggests, she chose drama over truth, engagement over clarity, narrative over friendship. This is where the footage shifts from retelling events to analyzing the psychology behind them, at least in the eyes of viewers. Fans begin comparing her ambiguous statements with his specific timeline. They begin wondering whether the inconsistencies in her recounting were accidental or strategic. And because the transcript never answers this directly, the question becomes its own form of tension. He then introduces the detail that sends shockwaves through social commentary channels. He says she enjoyed the media attention, not maliciously, but naturally, as someone accustomed to the spotlight. And that enjoyment is what made her reluctance to clarify the facts all the more painful for him. This idea that she allowed the misunderstanding because it benefited her momentarily creates a split in the audience deeper than any previous divide. Suddenly, it isn't just a question of who is telling the truth. It becomes a question of motivation, perception, priorities. Another interview reference adds weight to this. He mentioned she had thousands waiting, and yet didn't correct the public narrative. The imagery is chilling. Thousands of people watching, waiting, anticipating a revelation that never came. A void filled instead with speculation that crushed him in real time. He repeats that he didn't know what happened, that he went home, that he wasn't there. And those details become the pillars of his defense. But her silence becomes the shadow looming over everything. And yet, what makes this section of the transcript so layered is that he never explicitly accuses her of malicious intent. Instead, he repeatedly expresses confusion at her choices, confusion at the contradictions, confusion at why her side of the story required him to be implicated at all. The internet studies this pattern closely. She had no reason to believe he was involved. Why allow the world to think otherwise? And if she did believe he was involved, why not say so directly instead of implying it through omission? No answer surfaces. Instead, the tension intensifies when he directly highlights the inconsistency between her dramatic claims and the lack of urgency in her actions the night she says she almost died. The way he phrases it, questioning why. She didn't call law enforcement or medical authorities becomes one of the most replayed lines in the transcript. Viewers interpret his comment as a challenge to the authenticity of her framing, not necessarily to the truth of her experience, but to the narrative built around it. And his final statement about not being part of her support circle, not being someone dependent on her, not being someone who needs her financially or emotionally, creates a new understanding of why he chose to speak the way he did. He frames himself as someone who cannot be controlled or silenced by her influence. It's a declaration of independence, one that redefines their dynamic, and then the sudden shift that feels almost theatrical in its timing. He names Yandi as the only person who was truly wronged. Not elaborated, not explained, just stated. And the silence that follows is louder than the words themselves. The transcript moves on quickly after that line, but viewers never do. They freeze frame that, name that moment, that implication, because it suggests that the emotional fallout extended beyond the two people at the center of the conflict. That's where the documentary-style suspense builds to its peak, not in what was confirmed, but in what was left unsaid, in the empty spaces between his statements, in the contradictions between her recounting and his timeline, in the unanswered questions about motivation, secrecy, and as the footage winds into the final minutes, one truth becomes clear. The conflict was never about the night itself. It was about who controlled the narrative afterward, who shaped the story the world consumed, who benefited from the ambiguity, and who was left to clean up the consequences of a story they didn't write. That is the tension that carries into the closing reflection, the awareness that even now, with his words laid out plainly, the full truth remains hidden behind the veil. Parts neither party chose to reveal. The tension doesn't end when the footage stops. In many ways, it only becomes sharper in the silence that follows, because every viewer is left with a different version of the truth depending on which gaps they chose to fill. His timeline sits on one side, her vague recounting on the other, and between them lies a space that neither of them is willing to define. That's exactly where the speculation grows, where the theories multiply, and where the public now finds itself asking harder questions about how narratives are shaped, protected, and weaponized. And now this entire situation sits in your hands. You've heard the contradictions. You've seen how her story outlined only fragments and how his version pushed back with specifics. You've watched how he described being blamed, how he questioned her silence, how he suggested she enjoyed the attention, even as the internet tore him apart. But you've also seen how her framing allowed so many possible interpretations. Maybe intentional, maybe unintentional, maybe something else entirely. So now the real question becomes, what do you believe? Do you think her words accidentally confirmed more than she meant to? Did the inconsistencies reveal cracks in the story, or were they the natural result of chaos and confusion? Did he speak out of frustration, truth, or emotional exhaustion? And what does it mean that Yandi's name surfaced at the very end, almost like a shadow hanging behind everything left unspoken? Drop your thoughts below. Every perspective matters in a story built on silence and implication. Make sure you like this video, subscribe for the next chapter, and hit the bell so you don't miss what unfolds next. Because if this transcript has taught us anything, it's that the story isn't just what they said, it's what they refused to say.